Tonight on The Interview, we ask the questions the national media isn't esoteric but urgent, the kind that pull back the curtain of power, policy, and the forces that shape the world. This morning, Secretary of State Marco Rubio offered a nuanced take following the high-stakes Trump Putin summit in Alaska, amid talk of a Russia-Ukraine ceasefire and security guarantees. Rubio stressed that peace remains possible, but still distant, requiring meaningful concessions from both sides. Here to discuss it all is Dr. Aaron Retish, a specialist in late imperial and Soviet history out of Wayne State University. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Retish.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Was there any progress made here?
Yeah, considerably, in that there was conversation finally between the United States and Russia face to face. There seemed to be some discussions about specifics and some flexibility, I think, on all sides, although we don't know about Russia, towards the end game, towards an actual peace. Now, that doesn't mean that peace is going to come anytime soon or that it's going to be easy for anyone, but it seems that there was some momentum.
Let's talk about the optics of this and the so-called bilateral talks that we allegedly were supposed to be seeing here. That this was supposed to be, two men meeting and having a conversation, but it wasn't really a tete-a-tete. It ended up being, in reality, multiple parties from multiple sides. Did that in any way improve at least the appearance of this, that there were maybe more people at the table as part of these conversations and negotiations?
Sure. I mean, summits are all optics. It's all theater. And both sides did very well in taking full advantage of those optics. You know, the two leaders are visibly older than they were the last time they met. They both need each other kind of politically, I think through both of their propaganda or whatever you want to call it, political theater. But it meant a lot to Russia that there's the laying out of the red carpet, that the U.S. leader met the Russian leader as an equal, that he rode in his car. All of those were signs that Russia is a great power and not, as Obama once called Russia, a regional power. It showed the world that there was a possibility that Russia is going to come out of the cold, will join the international theater again. And for the United States, it put Trump kind of in the center of peace negotiations. It made it that he dictated the news cycle, and that it was in the United States, in a land formerly owned by Russia, also showed kind of American power. So the optics were good for both sides, and the Russian media kind of trumpeted them right after the summit.
Can we interpret the failure to come to some sort of agreement, some sort of ceasefire here as a manifestation of performative sovereignty almost? That there was nothing substantive that happened here because, as you say, this is really all about optics, and reaffirmed the feeling that it appears Putin needs to have, that he is leading a great superpower, even though in many ways, Russia certainly can't pretend to be the global power that it once was as the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Can it be read through that lens?
Yeah, although interestingly, Putin's foreign minister wore a shirt before the summit that said SSSR, the Soviet Union. So there are some weird dynamics there. Yeah, so it's certainly, so first of all, I don't like this this bifurcated idea that either Putin won or Trump won, right? It's a much more, it's as diplomatic, international diplomacy, it's much messier than that. And there's only so much that you and I know because we weren't in the room. So what actually was said between the two, we don't know. It's hard to actually determine if there was actually that there actually was an idea that there could be an actual peace deal kind of navigated in one day at the summit. At the end, though, it clearly seemed that it was cut short, that there were no promises actually met, and that there were just agreements for further negotiations. The lunch was cut short. The last statements were overly vague. So it's hard to actually see what was actually, what they actually agreed to. However, dialogue is a step forward.
Let's talk about territorial concessions. Everyone has their different opinions about this. Most people seem to agree that Crimea will never be back in the hands of Ukraine, but there's some dispute about the other roughly 19–20% of Ukraine that's currently under Russian control, including Donetsk and Luhansk. What are your theories about what the eventual borders of Ukraine would be if a ceasefire were reached?
So that's messy. First of all, I think most Ukrainians are hoping that even Crimea will one day be back as part of Ukraine in a post-Putin Russia. Who knows? The territorial concessions are really the big hurdle. And it seems that, Putin wants all of Donetsk, even though Russia only controls about 70% of it. And that would be a bitter pill for Ukraine to swallow. What's not being said in all of this is that, this is still an act of aggression, a violation of national sovereignty, and Ukraine would be giving, right, the proposal is to actually give away 20% of its territory that has a lot of Ukrainian nationals in it. All of this would have to be done legally by a referendum. So Zelensky his hands actually might be tied there legally. I just don't know what's going to happen with Donetsk. Some of the other territories, Zaporizhia, Kherson, could actually be seen. I think there could be movement towards making them to agree that Russia occupies them, some type of language like that.
Let's talk about NATO. This has been a sticking point for a very long time. And, there are people who are looking at this in all their punditry and believing that actually the discussion about the entry of Ukraine into NATO was some, and the advancement of NATO generally was some of what precipitated this war. And that was a big issue here. In the discussion that now has been floated around, and again, none of us know, but if we're talking about Article 5-like protections for Ukraine, isn't that basically saying that Ukraine would be a part of NATO, if not in name, certainly in fact? And that's
the rub.
Yeah, that's the rub, right? But yet also, are we making too big of a deal of it? Because Article 5 has only been invoked one time, and that was after September 11th, when NATO allies engaged in Afghanistan. So what's the truth of it when you balance those two factors?
For Russia, Ukraine cannot be part of NATO. I mean, this is, for the Kremlin, this was one of the key reasons why it invaded, because it sees that Putin sees the West encroaching upon Russia, and Ukrainian entry into NATO would just be further kind of encroachment into Russian sovereignty. So this is trying to thread the needle of allowing Ukraine to have the security guarantees while also putting appeasing Russia by not allowing them or having them join NATO. It could be the best of both worlds.
Well, could it also work in the reverse?
In what sense?
Well, is the credibility of NATO then completely dismantled by essentially adding a nation, but not really adding a nation, by saying you have all the protections of NATO membership, but you are not a part of NATO? And it creates sort of a liminal state of security that, you know, may not really have any teeth.
Right. That's a good point about the teeth. I guess I'll be interested to see what type of promises the United States makes in terms of security guarantees to promises of more weapons, for example, to Ukraine to help sturdy their defenses. But you know, you're getting at a larger issue that NATO is in a time of transition, a time of flux, where the United States is clearly trying to diminish its role in Western Europe, look towards the East, not expend as much resources. And so NATO is turning more into a European collective security that could also shift membership itself. So you're right. I mean, this could be collective action without the legal teeth, but at the same time, I don't think it's a stretch to say that neither Vladimir Putin nor Donald Trump believe strongly in, say, international law or the specifics of these collective agreements.
Could we see something similar to the Finlandization after the Cold War, where really there is this concept of sovereignty, which we're supposed to all be respecting, but it doesn't really hold up? And if that happens, then will Russia then maybe become a nation builder? And we're having this debate and trouble all over again on the continent. Yep.
So you're exactly right that during the Cold War, Finland was both a sovereign nation but had a kind of Soviet, strong Soviet influence. That is certainly a possibility where Russia tries to force Zelensky out, or in the next election pushes for a pro-Russian candidate. And, you know, this gets at a larger issue that Putin at the summit talked about the root causes of the war in Ukraine, which is essentially that Ukraine exists. So it is possible for Russia to continue to exert influence. I would think that there would be pushback from European countries against this Russian cultural and political incursions, and that Ukrainians themselves would be wise to these forces.
Yeah, let's also talk about what's going on in terms of sanctions. And you know, again, this is something I find different perspectives on, and some of them are very vast. We've seen more than 2,300, almost 23,000, almost close to actually 24,000 new sanctions that have been added since the invasion of Ukraine. And we're talking about the second invasion, not the 2014 invasion, but the 2022 invasion. And yet Russia is not crippled, although there are some new estimates that maybe Russia is cash-strapped, but none of this has been confirmed. Oil revenues have been slashed, oil exports, I think, by about 11%, but still not enough to cripple the economy in Russia. What needs to happen? What kind of sanctions could be put into place by the United States and the West to get Russia to come to the table?
So you're exactly right that we don't know how bad the Russian economy is right now. They have a very good central bank that has stabilized the economy. There are Interest rates are going up in Russia, which is one of the signs that there might be some destabilization. But this is an economy on full wartime mobilization, where the state is pumping cash into the economy to prop it up. And a lot of the economy is run into war needs. We have been surprised by kind of this fortress Russia, where Russia has been able to continue to have a viable economy for the past 3 years, even with strong sanctions. They've been able to do this not only because of the state, but also because of this gray market where both the people and the state are able to move around sanctions, and also because Russia has found willing partners to buy its energy, its natural energy, China and India in particular, but other countries too. So there are a few things that the West could do to increase sanctions. One is to continue to increase tariffs and sanctions on India, try to stop China, although that doesn't seem possible, from buying natural gas. There are still other sanctions upon the Russian banking industry, for example, that it could do. Russia is not fully out of SWIFT, so that's a possibility. It could go to more of an actual embargo, although that would be difficult to enforce. The problem with all of this is that economic sanctions take years to work, not months. So we're playing a waiting game. It's possible to increase the pressure on Russia and hope that everything will collapse, for example, during the winter. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, the EU price cap enforcement has yielded some steady effects here. And
Yep.
again, the United States is not nearly as engaged, although we have, along with the EU, targeted the shadow fleet, and we're seeing some progress there, but still the Russians are doing very well in keeping their shadow fleet afloat, literally, and not just figuratively. Yep. So right. It just seems as though it's very difficult to get at an economic solution. What kind of concession should we be asking of Vladimir Putin? Because everyone is saying he has not conceded anything at all, and right. we're hammering him. Yes. What kind of concession would you want to see from Putin?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, where you actually start to see the Russian, so Russia does feel isolated, internationally isolated, and they are, in many ways, more isolated now than they were during the Cold War. I mean, there's the internet, so there's still kind of this cultural interaction, but it's very hard for Russians to come to the West to travel, and for Westerners to go to Russia. Its economy is also right. It's being sucked out of the global economy, and there is some idea that Putin wants to re-engage with the international community, and that is a way to actually push more concessions. So the concessions could come in a variety of means. I mean, there are economic. It's not something that I would favor, but Russia opening up its economy to foreign markets, for example, in the Arctic, with natural mineral exploitation. But there could also be other concessions, especially with Ukraine. For example, you mentioned the promise not to interfere with Ukrainian politics, acknowledgement that Ukraine is a nation and that it will not that it actually recognizes Ukraine, it recognizes the Baltic, that it upholds human rights, which I think would be a huge concession. And actually, probably the biggest concession would be territorial, that actually pulls out of parts of Ukraine and somehow rejoins the international community.
Can there be any resolution here without a full, comprehensive peace deal as opposed to a ceasefire? The absence of war doesn't necessarily mean that there is true peace.
So there could be a ceasefire. That's not going to happen. It's from all sides. That was, in many ways, a ceasefire would have been the best resolution, especially for Ukraine, because it would give them breathing room, allow them a chance to rearm, and essentially wait for winter to come where it becomes harder to advance. The United States and Russia, right? The United is one of the big moves of the summit was that Trump agreed that there should be a peace deal. That means that there's going to be a lot of pressure on Ukraine and the European allies and its European allies on Monday to find the pill that it's willing to swallow. And that's going to be territorial concessions. If that falls through, we might be back where we were a couple of months ago, where Russia kind of plods ahead into Ukraine and this war goes on for another couple of years.
Does recent deal making mean that the Trump administration maybe is in a very unique position to be able to do something to bring this war to an end and to see a resolution that is fair, whatever that means for Ukraine and Russia, especially when you look at the agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and that really was a trilateral deal which involved the United States, where the United States got something out of it. And theoretically, you could see a scenario in which the Trump administration makes it in some ways a trilateral deal. Is that what we're looking at, especially when it comes to the as you mentioned, the minerals deal? That will be some of this, that we will have a continuous tap on Ukrainian minerals and resources as part of brokering some sort of three-way agreement. What do you see?
Yes. I presume that if the United States is going to agree to any type of security guarantees, that's going to include the implementation or moving forward with this agreement on Ukrainian rare earth minerals or Ukrainian minerals. I was most surprised by Sunday that there wasn't a move forward with economic collaboration between the United States and Russia. I fully expected at least some announcement of an agreement for economic cooperation. If there's going to be peace between Russia and Ukraine, I fully expect the United States to, the Trump administration to try to leverage some kind of U.S. economic might and secure some type of arm into the Russian economy, especially in the Arctic. So there will be, in that way, it will be trilateral. Yeah, so I fully expect that.
Let's talk about the EU and its involvement. Zelensky is supposed to be heading to the United States, and EU leaders, seemingly every 20 minutes, are now in the news, who are also going to be there or attending or having conversations with Vladimir Zelensky. Who do you see sort of taking the lead from the European Union, and how will their influence shape what kind of peace agreement we see ultimately?
Yeah, so it's not just the EU, but NATO will also have representation. Look for Macron, the leader of the president of France, to have a prominent position, in part because of his relationship with Zelensky, in part because of his own personality. Great Britain possibly will also play a lead. I think in part they're there to hold Ukraine's hand and to make sure that we don't see what we saw the last time that Zelensky was in the Oval Office, to see this blow up, which wouldn't actually be good for anyone, including the United States. And also to provide some type of security guarantees to Ukraine and to push it towards making a deal. At the end of the day, I see Ukraine becoming more intertwined with the EU at once there is peace, or whatever whatever we'll call it.
Yeah, and I wonder with Trump pressing for some of these rapid settlements, from Ukraine to the Caucasus, and then obviously the thing that we seem to have forgotten, which is these talks about Iran and its nuclear capabilities and the enrichment of uranium. All of this is connected because Russia is a huge nuclear power, and I wonder if this might precipitate, depending on what kind of resolution we see, a third world war. When you're talking about maybe Russia and Iran collaborating in China. And have we thought this all the way through? Is there a scenario in which a peace deal shouldn't include some sort of conversation about Russia supplying nuclear weapons to Iran and its own nuclear capabilities? This is an opportunity for us to tamp down on that. What do you think?
Sure. I don't see that happening. I mean, yes, all of these, we're in a very dangerous position right now geopolitically, that any of these regional skirmishes, we saw this with Iran just a couple months ago. One of the parts of the peace negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan was kind of this new road at the southern part of Azerbaijan, and that's actually right on the right on the tip of Iran. So there, the United States is kind of poking Iran. That said, Russia and Iran are frenemies. They will both use each other when they need. So Russia and Iran are in new negotiations to provide for Russia to provide nuclear facilities to Iran. But collaboration or kind of an alliance is a major step that I would be shocked to see some type of treaty. Same thing with Russia and China, in that China understands the limits of their negotiations with Russia. It's commercial, it's political, but there's also, they'll only push it so far. China is also engaged in massive espionage of Russia because the Chinese government doesn't trust Russia. And China has always been very pragmatic in its relationships with Russia. So I don't see that happening. But there are always, if pushed into a corner, these strange alliances can happen.
All right, we only have about 45 seconds, so I want to ask you about something that the president said on the plane when he was talking to Fox News, which was, of course, he mentioned China. So the question of China and Taiwan has to be integral to what's happening here, especially when we're talking about ontological security. And the fact that this could metastasize the situation between Taiwan and China into something far greater, depending on what China sees happen here with Russia and Ukraine. What do you think the outcome is there as quickly as you can?
Russia's invasion of Ukraine showed that national sovereignty can be violated, and with success for the invasion, for the invading forces. That shows that it could happen in China with Taiwan. I would be shocked to see that happen, but clearly there's now precedent.
All right.
We should be worried about that.
Okay, something to consider, and we'll be following it. Thank you so much, Dr. Aaron Retish from Wayne State University. We appreciate your expertise. Have a great Sunday evening.
Thank you for having me.